For years, she was the invisible daughter in a powerful family empire. Her brother was praised, her sister was spoiled, and her father treated her ideas like childish fantasies. But what none of them knew was that the quiet daughter they dismissed had spent the last decade building something far bigger than their family business. On Thanksgiving night, her father planned to announce the future of his company. He expected obedience, applause, and control. Instead, she calmly looked across the dinner table and revealed the truth. She was the buyer, and by morning, the empire that once rejected her would belong to her.
If you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, you need to hear this story. I'm Ava Reed, the middle daughter of the Reed real estate empire. And trust me, being underestimated has its perks. As I walked into our Chicago estate for Thanksgiving, nobody had a clue I was about to blow up our family's entire world. They just expected me to be my usual quiet self. They were so wrong. The big announcement my father was about to make wasn't just going to shake things up, it was going to trigger a payback he never saw coming. If you know what it's like to be trapped in family business drama, you won't want to miss this. Drop a comment, subscribe, and watch how I turned my father's arrogance into the ultimate revenge. I grew up in Winnetka, one of Chicago's richest suburbs, in a sprawling Tudor mansion with an indoor pool and grounds so big we had a full-time landscaping crew. We looked like the perfect American family. My grandfather, Samuel Reed, started Reed Innovations with a single duplex back in the 70s. He built it into a respected local firm before my father Richard took over in '95. Dad turned it into a $50 million empire, developing luxury high-rises all over the Midwest. And he never let us forget for a single second that it was all because of him. There were 3 of us Reed kids. Ethan, at 38, was the golden boy. He coasted into a vice president role right out of college, though he spent more time on his yacht than in the office. I was the middle kid, the one who actually inherited our grandfather's passion for architecture. I was sketching blueprints at 12, won design awards in high school, and graduated top of my class from Northwestern. I had visions for the company. But to my dad, I was just there. Then came Chloe, the 29-year-old baby of the family, who leveraged the Reed name to become a lifestyle influencer with a massive following. Chloe loved the old money aesthetic but had zero interest in blueprints or zoning laws. Still, she'd post selfies from our development sites, pretending to be some kind of design consultant while adding absolutely nothing of value. Our mother, Eleanor, came from a prominent Chicago family. Her way of handling conflict was to ignore it and pour a fresh glass of Sauvignon Blanc. She tried to be a mediator, but really just enabled Dad's ego, especially when it came to him dismissing me. "Richard, maybe you should listen to Ava's design concept," she might say, only to shrink back when Dad gave her the look. "Eleanor, please. We're talking about a real project here," he'd scoff, before turning back to Ethan to talk about their golf game. Every family dinner was a business meeting I wasn't invited to. Dad and Ethan would talk deals and zoning permits, using acronyms and inside jokes, while I sat there knowing more about architectural trends and urban planning than both of them combined. If I ever tried to add something, Dad would give me that patronizing smile and say, "That's nice, Ava. But let's leave the big decisions to the men, shall we?" The final straw came when I was 22, right out of college with honors. I designed a revolutionary plan for a sustainable mixed-use development years ahead of its time. I poured months into the proposal, complete with financial projections and architectural models. My father finally agreed to let me present to the board, more as a favor than anything serious. I can still feel my heart pounding as I walked into that oak-paneled boardroom, my portfolio and digital presentation ready to go. The board was all his golfing buddies, men in their 60s who looked at me with polite indifference as I set up my projector. I was barely 10 minutes in when Dad loudly cleared his throat, glanced at his Rolex, and held up a hand. "I think that's quite enough," he said with a smile that never touched his eyes. "Ava, darling, this is creative, but completely unrealistic for a company like ours. Our buyers want classic luxury, not some trendy eco project." He then turned to the board with a little laugh. "She's fresh out of school, full of these idealistic fantasies. Now, shall we get back to business?" I felt my face burn with shame as I packed up my things to their chuckles. They just moved on. That night, I made a choice. I was leaving Chicago. I would build my own empire, one so powerful my father would have to notice. I moved to Austin with $5,000 to my name. My parents thought it was a cute little rebellion. "She'll be back once the money runs out," I heard Dad tell Mom on the phone. Those first few years were brutal. I had a tiny apartment in a rough part of Austin that ate up almost all my cash. I survived on instant noodles and cheap coffee, working insane hours, first at a junior architect firm, then freelancing. Every spare cent went into my own venture. I launched Apex Dynamics under the name Alex Monroe. The initials stood for Ava Monroe, but nobody knew. I needed to succeed or fail completely on my own terms, away from the Reed shadow. I started with small projects, flipping houses and designing commercial spaces, and I poured every dime of profit back into the business. After 3 years, I had a small team and a real office downtown. The game changed when I secured funding for a large-scale, sustainable community project, ironically, a more ambitious version of the very idea my father had mocked. Investors came calling, but I refused to give up control. Over the next 7 years, Apex Dynamics grew exponentially, acquiring smaller firms and expanding our portfolio. We were soon valued at over $200 million, with projects across the country, and through it all, I was simply Alex Monroe. In the development world, Alex Monroe was known as a visionary but intensely private CEO who rarely gave interviews or went to industry events. For the few times a public appearance was unavoidable, I changed my look slightly and let my chief operating officer do most of the talking. My family knew absolutely nothing. On the rare holiday calls, I'd just say work was going okay or I was keeping busy. My dad never asked for details, he'd already written me off. And that was exactly what I wanted as I built Apex into the weapon that would finally bring him to his knees. What they did know is that for the last year, I'd been quietly buying up the key parcels of land and contracting firms tied to my father's next big legacy project. I studied his plans, found all the weak spots, and positioned Apex to take control. 6 months ago, I had my CFO make an anonymous partnership offer through a shell corporation. Predictably, my father rejected it out of hand. Now, 10 years after that humiliation, I was flying home for Thanksgiving with a plan. Reed Innovations was failing, stuck in the past. My father had no idea I was about to become both his biggest rival and his only lifeline. The week before Thanksgiving, I was in my corner office overlooking Austin, finalizing the paperwork on the biggest deal of my career. My assistant came in with my flight details. "Your private jet to Chicago is confirmed for Tuesday morning," she said, setting the folder down. "Are you sure you don't want the legal team with you for this?" I shook my head. "No, this is personal. I have to do this alone." After she left, my phone buzzed. It was Sophie, my best friend from those broken Austin days. "Are you seriously going through with this family Thanksgiving thing?" she asked. "You haven't seen them in 2 years." I sighed, looking out at the skyline. "I have to be there, Soph. I need to see his face when it all goes down." "I just remember that disastrous Christmas 2 years ago," she said. "Your dad announced Ethan's promotion to EVP, while you were quietly celebrating a massive 9-figure deal he knew nothing about." The memory still stung. Dad had toasted to the future of Reed Innovations, looking right at my brother, who was so hungover he'd been useless in a meeting that morning. "This Thanksgiving is different," I promised her. "This time, everything changes." That night, I packed, choosing each outfit like a piece of armor. No more hiding. The woman they remembered was gone. My suitcase held a different kind of armor. A Tom Ford suit, a Dior dress for the Thanksgiving meal, Louboutin stilettos, all quiet signals of power, a Patek Philippe watch, a Bottega Veneta clutch, and simple diamond studs from Cartier. Nothing screamed money, but everything whispered it. For years, I'd hidden how well I was doing from my family. Now, I wanted them to see the hints before the big announcement. Tuesday morning, I boarded the private jet I rarely used. I usually fly commercial, even with my wealth. But this trip was different. During the 4-hour flight, I reviewed the acquisition contract one last time, making sure every single clause was perfect. It was funny, really. For years, I'd flown coach to Chicago, eating stale pretzels crammed in a middle seat, all while building the very firm that let me land like this. The jet landed at a private airstrip near Chicago, where a black Maybach was waiting on the tarmac, another indulgence just for this trip. Driving through the familiar tree-lined streets toward Lake Forest, I felt a mix of old memories and new resolve. The Ashford estate looked exactly the same, a sprawling Tudor mansion with perfect lawns, now frosted with early November snow. A huge holiday wreath was already on the massive oak door, ready for the season. I told the driver to wait and took a deep breath, climbing the stone steps I knew so well. Mom opened the door before the housekeeper could, her face lit with excitement. Her eyes flickered over my outfit. "Chloe, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of Chanel and Chardonnay. "You look sharp. Is that a Cartier watch?" "Just a little something," I murmured back, hugging her. "It's good to see you, Mom." She guided me into the grand foyer, talking about dinner plans and Sophia's latest blog post. I just nodded, setting my purse on a marble table beneath the giant crystal chandelier, home with all its baggage. "Dad's in his office," Mom mentioned. "He's been swamped with some major deal, a secret even from me." I managed a smile. I'll just pop in before I unpack. Dad's study was always off limits, a den of dark wood, worn leather, and stacks of financial reports. I knocked once, then walked right in a tiny rebellion. He glanced up, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Surprise flashed in his eyes before his usual indifferent mask slipped back on. Chloe, you're here. He offered a stiff, brief hug and pointed to a chair. Trip from LA, go okay? Perfectly smooth, I said, pointedly ignoring the chair. I took a private jet. Saved so much time. Confusion flickered across his face. Private? That's a huge expense. I just shrugged. Business has been very good. Before he could question me, his phone buzzed. Excuse me, I have to take this, he said, turning his back. It was the perfect opportunity. I glanced at his desk, and there it was, the acquisition proposal from Apex Capital Partners, with my firm's logo right at the top. My pulse hammered, but my face was a mask of calm when he hung up. Sorry, he said, quickly sliding the papers into a file. Big moves at the company. It's complicated, that old dismissal. It didn't even sting anymore. Of course, Dad, I'll let you work. I walked out of his office and went upstairs to my childhood bedroom. Mom had preserved it like a museum of my youth. Debate team trophies, math competition medals, and a Stanford banner still hung on the walls. They were dusty relics of a past life, of trying to impress a man who never was. After a quick shower, I went downstairs and found Liam in the den, nursing a whiskey at 3 in the afternoon. He had Dad's height and swagger, but a life of ease had given him a soft edge. Well, look what the cat dragged in. He smirked, raising his glass. The runaway sister. Still playing with other people's money out in LA? Something like that, I said through a clenched jaw. How's that little investment fund of yours? Finally turning a profit? His condescending tone was a bitter taste of home. Before I could even answer, Sophia swept in, phone held up to film her grand entrance for her followers. Chloe's home, you guys. Family reunion vibes, she announced, giving me 2 quick air kisses. You look amazing, sis. Finally land a rich husband? Nope, just working hard, I said, moving away from her camera. Liam pulled his new girlfriend into the frame, whispering to her while Sophia filmed. That's Kenzie. She's 24, a fitness model. On cue, a tall blonde walked in, wearing designer jeans and a sweater that fit her like a glove. Liam wrapped an arm around her, beaming. Kenzie, this is my sister, Chloe. She's in LA doing some finance thing. His wave of a hand dismissed my entire career. Oh, I love LA. Kenzie gushed. The boutiques on Rodeo are to die for. Our painful chat was interrupted by Dad's voice booing from his dadesi. The words were faint, but his excitement was clear. Yes, that's perfect. We'll sign tomorrow after the holiday. 90 million is the final number. Apex Capital has been playing hardball on the terms. I slipped away to the kitchen, needing to breathe. The staff here had always been kinder to me than my own flesh and blood. Elena, our housekeeper for decades, was chopping some vegetables for tomorrow's dinner. Miss Chloe, she said with a genuine smile. It is so good to have you home. You look so well. LA must be good for you. Thanks, Elena. Can I help? She waved me off. No, your mother wants a perfect day. A very big day, she said. Your father has a big surprise. I nodded. I wondered if the entire staff knew about the deal before his own daughter did. So I've heard. The cocktail hour was a masterclass in dysfunction. Mom floated around with a bright, fake smile. Dad glanced at his phone every 2 minutes. Liam bragged about his new ski condo in Aspen. Sophia filmed it all for her online audience. I sipped my Chardonnay, observing them. I wasn't the little girl desperate for their approval anymore. I was a business owner about to change their entire world. Dinner served, Mom announced, leading us to the dining room where generations of Ashfords had eaten. I took a slow, deep breath and walked in, knowing that before this night was over, nothing would ever be the same. The Ashford Thanksgiving dinner was always a spectacle. A massive mahogany table gleamed under a crystal chandelier set with the Royal Copenhagen china used only on holidays. Silver candelabras with tall ivory candles lit the massive centerpiece of autumn flowers and gourds that Mom no doubt ordered from Chicago's most expensive florist. I had to laugh. I was seated at the absolute end of the table, as far from my father as physically possible. Of course, Liam, the heir apparent, was at Dad's right hand with Kenzie beside him. Sophia was on Dad's left. Mom sat at the other end with me, a whole universe of polished wood separating us from the real center of power. Elena and the staff brought out the courses, starting with a creamy wild mushroom soup topped with truffle oil. Then came a kale salad with toasted pecans and figs, and finally the main event, a 25-pound turkey, glistening and golden with every side dish imaginable. Dad carved it like a surgeon while Sophia filmed, narrating for her followers. And here's Daddy, carving the turkey just as his father did. The Ashford tradition of excellence continues. I saw Mom flinch at Sophia's performance before draining her wine glass. That had to be at least her 4th since I got here. After we were all served, Dad raised his glass for the annual Ashford Gratitude speech, where we all had to say what we were thankful for. It used to mean something. Now it was just a contest. Liam went first, as the eldest son always did. I'm grateful for another banner year at Ashford Manufacturing, he began, though my own research showed they'd lost significant contracts for 2 straight quarters. And for my new Porsche 911 GT3, he squeezed Kenzie's hand. And for this amazing woman and our new life together. Kenzie beamed and kissed him, while Sophia pretended to gag behind her phone. Then it was Sophia's turn. I'm just so grateful for hitting 2 million subscribers this year! My new partnership with Radiant Beauty has been a dream, and I love sharing the Ashford family's legacy with all my followers. She flashed a perfect smile at Dad, who gave a nod of approval despite his constant jabs about her influencer career. When my turn came, I set down my wine glass and spoke with intention. I am thankful for the hard lessons, the ones that teach you that rejection can be a gift, that grit matters more than your last name, and that true success is built, not given. I raised my glass to carving your own path. Dad's brow furrowed, catching the edge in my tone, before launching into his own speech about the legacy of his hotel empire. Mom gave a vague toast to family and health, her words slurring slightly. Dad kept checking his watch, whispering to my mother, whose smile grew tighter and tighter as the meal wore on. Leo dominated the conversation with stories of celebrity guests he'd supposedly charmed, while Chloe kept interrupting to read comments from her followers on her Thanksgiving live stream. As the dessert was being served, Dad suddenly tapped his fork against his crystal glass, the chime cutting through the chatter. I have an announcement to make, he said, standing at the head of the table like a king addressing his court, a man used to every eye in the room being on him. The table went still. Even Chloe lowered her phone. As you all know, I have poured my entire life into making the Sterling Collection a benchmark for luxury. But all empires must evolve, and the time has come for a new chapter. He paused, letting the suspense build. I have decided to sell the company. Leo choked on his Cabernet. What? Dad, you have to be kidding. Dad held up a hand to quiet him. I have been in talks with a very eager investment group for months. The deal closes tomorrow morning. Chloe let out a theatrical gasp. But Daddy, what about the Sterling legacy? My entire brand is built on being a Sterling heiress. That brings me to the second part of my announcement. Dad said, his face a perfect mask. The money from the sale will not be passed down to you children as an inheritance. At that, both Leo and Chloe exploded. That is our birthright! Leo slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. What do you mean? Chloe cried, her camera now broadcasting the family meltdown to all her followers. Where is all the money going? Dad waited for their shouting to subside. Your mother and I will use a portion for our retirement. The rest will launch the Sterling Foundation, a charity to support education in the hospitality industry. Leo shot to his feet, his face flushed with rage. I gave 10 years to this company. You promised me I would run it one day. You promised us. Chloe was now openly weeping, though she made sure to angle her phone for the most dramatic shot. Amidst the chaos, I sat perfectly still, taking a small, deliberate sip of wine. Mom's gaze landed on me, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Clara, she said quietly, you don't seem very surprised. The noise at the table slowly died down as their attention swung to me, as if they'd just remembered I was there. Actually, I said, setting my glass down with a soft click. I only have one question. I looked my father straight in the eye. Who is the buyer? Dad's chest puffed out, thrilled to be the one holding all the cards, a major private equity firm called Aura Capital. They are offering $150 million, which is incredibly generous in this market. I took a slow sip of water, the pause stretching out, letting the tension build in the room. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken history and a looming future. Dad, I said finally, my voice calm and even. I am Aura Capital. The room went dead silent. I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hall, marking off seconds of stunned disbelief. For a long moment, nobody breathed. The silence was absolute, as if the air itself had turned to glass around us. I watched the emotions war across my father's face. Confusion, denial, shock, and then the first spark of pure rage. Leo was the first to move, shoving his chair back so hard it almost toppled, knocking over his wine glass. The dark red liquid bled across the white linen like a fresh wound. What in the hell are you talking about? He yelled, his eyes darting between me and Dad in a panic. Chloe was, unbelievably, still filming, her hands shaking as she captured what was about to become legendary content for her channel. Oh my God, she whispered into her phone. Did my sister just say she owns Aura Capital? The company buying our family's hotel chain? Mom fumbled for her wine, found the glass empty and reached for the bottle instead. I rose slowly from my chair, a strange calm settling over me now that the secret was out. Me Vance, I said. Clara Elizabeth Vance. That is the name I have been working under for 10 years while I built Aura Capital into a $200 million firm. Dad finally found his voice. This is absurd, he stammered. Aura Capital is run by C.E. Vance, a titan in the investment world, not my daughter who plays around with some small-time startups in Austin. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. Not a business card. I slid it across the table to him, an article from Forbes already on the screen. Actually, Dad, I am C.E. Vance. I founded Aura Capital 10 years ago, right after you laughed my business plan out of your boardroom. Dad snatched the phone, staring at my picture under the headline as if it would suddenly change. This is some kind of sick joke, he said, but the certainty was gone from his voice. Aura Capital now owns controlling shares in your top 3 booking partners and your primary linen supplier. I continued listing the companies I had strategically acquired. We also recently bought majority stakes in the 2 luxury travel agencies that send you 70% of your clientele. Acquiring the Sterling Collection is the final move in a strategy I've been executing for the last 2 years. You've been spying on us, Leo accused, his face twisted in a sneer. That is illegal. No, Leo. It is called due diligence. Everything I know about the Sterling Collection's finances came from public records, market reports, and perfectly legal channels. I turned back to my father. The truth is, the brand has been failing for years. Your hotels are dated, your management style is ancient, and you've lost nearly 30% of your market share in 5 years. How dare you, Dad began, but I cut him off. I tried to help you first. 6 months ago, Aura Capital made an anonymous partnership offer. It would have kept the Sterling name on the hotels while we provided the cash and the upgrades you desperately need. You rejected it without a second thought. Dad's eyes went wide with sudden understanding. The Phoenix Group, that was you. I just nodded. I wanted to give you a chance to save the company without your pride getting in the way. But you wouldn't take it. So you've been plotting against your own family all this time. Leo screamed, planning some kind of corporate raid. Not a raid, Leo. A legal acquisition for $150 million, which is far more than this company is actually worth. I kept my voice steady, betraying none of the emotion churning inside me. And let's be real, this stopped being a family business when Dad made it clear that only one of his children was ever going to run it. Regardless of that child's stunning lack of talent. Chloe finally lowered her phone, the reality of the situation sinking in. So, does this mean you're our boss? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Technically, yes, I said. Though the entire management team is about to be completely restructured. Dad shot to his feet, his chair screeching on the polished floor. This deal is off, he declared. I will not sell my legacy to my own daughter just for some petty revenge. I simply shook my head. The contracts are all signed, Dad. The board gave its final approval this morning. The press release goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. As of today, Aura Capital legally owns the Sterling Collection. I will fight this in court, he threatened, but the doubt in his eyes showed he knew he was beaten. Your lawyers will what? I asked gently. They already vetted the entire deal. They advised you it was the best offer you were ever going to get. What are you going to claim now? That you're upset because the brilliant CEO you've been praising for months turned out to be your own daughter. Mom finally spoke, her voice surprisingly clear despite the whine. All these years, Clara. All these years you were building this whole other life, and we just thought, while you thought I was failing, I finished for her. Yes. Exactly. Dad slammed his palm down on the table. You have a choice to make, Clara. Right now, you can be my daughter, or you can be the woman who stole my company. You can't be both. The ultimatum hung in the air, so predictable it was almost sad. A decade ago, that choice would have destroyed me. It just proved what I knew all along. That's where you're wrong, Dad, I said calmly. I'm both. I always have been. You just chose not to see it. Maya was really crying now, black mascara running down her flawless cheeks. What about us, our trust funds, our social standing? That, I answered honestly, depends on whether you actually want to work for the company or just live off it. Garrett jabbed a finger at me. You planned this for Thanksgiving, didn't you? To humiliate us in front of everyone. I planned it for Thanksgiving because I knew the whole family would be here, I corrected him. And because 10 years ago, at this very dinner, Dad announced your promotion to vice president, even though you were completely unqualified, while telling me my MIT degree and 3 years of coding weren't enough for a junior manager job. Dad's face flushed red at the memory. That was different. Garrett is my son, my firstborn. And there it is, I said softly, the real reason I never stood a chance. Not my skills, not my education, not my hard work, just my gender. The brutal truth silenced the entire room again. Even Garrett looked ashamed. This conversation is over, Dad finally snapped. Everybody out. I have to call my lawyers. He bolted from the dining room, and moments later we heard his study door slam shut. Mom stood up, a little wobbly on her feet. I should probably check on him, she said, but she stopped by my chair first. Are you really worth $200 million? I just nodded. And all those times you couldn't come home for Christmas because you said you couldn't afford a plane ticket? I was running a company, Mom. And I needed you all to keep underestimating me. She touched my shoulder for a second, her face impossible to read, and then went after Dad. As everyone else left, I sat there alone, looking at the abandoned Thanksgiving feast. The turkey was cold, the candles had burned low, and the family I'd tried so hard to impress had scattered in anger and shock. This should have felt like a victory. Instead, I just felt empty, realizing that while I finally had their attention, I was farther than ever from their acceptance. I escaped to my old childhood bedroom while the chaos raged downstairs. I could hear Dad yelling into his phone, probably at his attorneys, with Mom's calmer voice trying to soothe him. Every so often, Garrett's angry shouts would cut through, followed by Maya's theatrical sobbing. My old room was like a museum, frozen in the past. It was the twin bed with its navy comforter, the desk where I'd spent endless nights coding and dreaming, and bookshelves packed with computer science texts and the few fantasy novels I'd allowed myself. My debate trophies and academic awards were just gathering dust on the shelves. All these achievements had meant nothing to the one person whose approval I desperately wanted. I ran my hand over the spines of my old journals, pulling one out. Inside were business plans, sketches of algorithms, and notes for the cloud platform that became Everest's main product. It was ironic, really, that the empire I built started in the very room where I had always felt completely invisible. A sharp knock on the door startled me. I opened it to find Garrett standing there, his face flushed with either rage or whiskey, or maybe both. We need to talk, he said, shoving past me into the room without an invitation. I closed the door and leaned back against it with my arms crossed. About what, Garrett? How I ruined Thanksgiving, or how you plan to inherit as a business you helped run into the ground? You think you're so smart, don't you? He hissed, pacing around the small room like a caged tiger. Little Morgan with her computers and her secret life. Did you enjoy lying to us all this time? About as much as you enjoyed taking credit for my ideas, I shot back. Remember 6 years ago at Christmas when I suggested our software needed to move to cloud-based systems? Dad called it trendy nonsense? But 3 months later, you pitched the exact same thing as your own brilliant idea. Garrett stopped pacing, his face darkening. I was the one who stayed here. I was the one putting in the hours at the company while you ran off to California to make some kind of point. You put in the hours, sure. But what did you actually do, Garrett? Besides, run up the company card on client dinners at strip clubs and use your corner office to sleep off hangovers. His face contorted with fury. You don't know what you're talking about. I landed the Westfield account. Westfield came to us because I personally called their CTO as Emmy Stone and suggested your services. It was part of my long-term plan to buy you out, I told him. And I know exactly what I'm talking about because I've been auditing the company's books remotely for the past year, including the files you thought were safe on the local server. The color drained from his face. What are you saying? I know about the $300,000 you siphoned off through fake vendor accounts, Garrett. I know about the fake consulting fees that went right into your offshore bank account. I know everything. He took a threatening step towards me. You can't prove any of that. I have the transaction records, the account numbers, and the IP logs showing the fake entries were made from your office computer on days you were the only one there. I held his gaze. I'm not going to press criminal charges, Garrett. That would hurt the company too much right now. But don't test me, he muttered, clenching his hands into fists. You would betray your own brother? I would hold a thief accountable who happens to be a relative, I corrected him. There's a difference. We stood in a tense silence before finally turned away. This isn't over, he warned, ripping the door open. Actually, it is. I called after him. You just haven't realized it yet. I had barely closed the door when someone knocked again. This time it was Maya, her makeup perfectly redone despite the tear tracks still visible on her face. So, you're like a secret millionaire, she said, walking in and sitting right on my bed. That's honestly kind of badass. I had to laugh at how quickly her attitude had changed. Is that what you were saying 5 minutes ago? You seemed pretty upset about your social status. She shrugged, looking at her nails. I'm adaptable. It's key for an influencer's career. She looked up, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. Imagine the content we could make. My sister, the tech queen. My followers would eat that up. Is that why you came in here, Maya? To pitch me a partnership? More like a mutually beneficial arrangement, she said, smoothing out her dress. You need a public image that makes you seem more human, and I need a link to actual success, not just posing with products. Her proposal was so openly transactional and so typically Maya that I almost had to respect it. And what about actually working? Learning the business? Contributing more than just your Instagram feed? She wrinkled her nose like she'd smelled something bad. Ugh, no. Coding is boring and business meetings are soul-crushing. But I could be a brand ambassador. Represent the company in the lifestyle space. A lifestyle representative for an enterprise software integration company, I repeated slowly. Do you even hear yourself? Maya stood up straighter. Fine, laugh at me like everyone else does, but my social media skills are valuable in today's world, whether you see it or not. I built my own brand from nothing, just like you did. I had never considered it that way, and for a second, I was actually speechless. There was a strange logic to what she was saying, even if our methods and morals were worlds apart. I'll think about it, I said finally. But not tonight. She nodded, happy with that small victory. Just so you know, I already posted about a major family business shakeup. Very vague. My engagement is through the roof. After she was gone, I sat at my old desk and opened my laptop to go over the final acquisition details. Another soft knock interrupted me. Come in, I said, thinking it was probably one of the house staff with some tea. But it was Mom, looking surprisingly clear-eyed for how much wine she'd had. She'd changed from her dinner gown into a cashmere sweater and slacks, setting aside her Boston Society armor for a moment. Your father has locked himself in the study with a bottle of scotch and the company bylaws, she said, sitting in the window seat where she once read me bedtime stories. He's convinced he can find some loophole to stop this sale. There isn't one, I said plainly. His own lawyers already told him that. She nodded, her eyes drifting around my old room. You know, I kept it all exactly how you left it. I always figured you'd come back home once you got this little rebellion out of your system. It was never a rebellion, Mom. It was my life's work. $200 million, she thought, with a slight shake of her head. My daughter secretly built a company that size while we thought she was struggling. I turned to face her fully. You could have asked. Any of you could have shown some real interest in my work, but no one ever really wanted to know. Tears welled in her eyes. I knew, Chloe, not the specifics, not how big you'd gotten, but I knew you were brilliant. I saw it when you were little. The way your mind just worked differently, grasping ideas the rest of us couldn't. She wiped her cheeks. I just had no idea how to support that in this family, not with a man like your father. You could have defended me, I said, the old bitterness rising in my throat. All those times he dismissed me, humiliated me in front of everyone. You said nothing! I was wrong, she admitted, her voice quiet. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being a supportive wife, but I see now I failed as a mother when you needed someone in your corner. Her simple admission cracked something that had been frozen inside me for years. I came home expecting a fight, accusations, maybe even legal action. I never prepared for actual regret. So what now? Mom asked after a long silence. Tomorrow morning, the acquisition is announced. Donovan Industries will become a subsidiary of Apex Innovations. The company name will survive for now, but the operations are being completely overhauled. I paused, then added, Dad and Leo will be offered advisory roles with no real power if they want them. It's really just for appearances during the handover. And you'll move back to Chicago? I shook my head. No, I'm staying in Austin. We're setting up the new executive team there. She nodded, seeming to get everything I wasn't saying, that I'd outgrown this house, this family drama, this role they'd cast for me. Your father may never forgive you for this, she warned. I know, I replied, but this isn't about his forgiveness, Mom. It's about finally being seen. After she left, I worked all night, preparing for the morning's showdown and ignoring Zara's texts asking for an update. As the first hint of dawn filtered through the curtains, I put on one of my sharpest tailored suits, pulled my hair into a tight bun, and applied the minimal makeup I was known for in my rare public appearances. This morning would either be a new chapter for the Donovan family or the final page. Either way, I was ready. When I came downstairs at 7 a.m., the kitchen was dead silent. Our housekeeper handed me coffee without a word, her eyes a mix of worry and respect. The formal dining room was clear of last night's Thanksgiving wreckage. No sign of the family meltdown remained, just a thick tension in the air. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my leadership team, all anxious about the 9 a.m. acquisition announcement. There was also a text from Zara. Did you drop the nuke? Are they still breathing? I was typing a reply when Dad appeared in the doorway. He looked 10 years older than yesterday, the lines around his eyes deeper, his perfect posture slightly slumped. He clearly hadn't slept. My study. Now. His tone left no room for argument. I followed him down the hall into the room that had always been the nerve center of the Donovan family's power. The dark wood walls were covered in framed awards. Magazine covers featuring Dad, industry trophies, photos with politicians and local celebrities. There was, of course, no mention of my achievements, though my university graduation photo was on a side table, half hidden by other family pictures. Dad sat behind his massive desk, a power move he'd used for decades to intimidate opponents. I chose not to take the visitor's chair. Instead, I sat on the edge of his desk, instantly shifting the dynamic in a way he definitely noticed. "My lawyers confirmed what you claimed last night," he said, cutting right to it. "The sale is airtight." The board's vote was unanimous. "Of course it was," I replied. "Donovan Industries has been losing market share for 3 years. Your tech is obsolete, your management is bloated, and your product pipeline is empty." The board knew a lifeline when they saw one. "50 million, he muttered, shaking his head. "This company was valued at 70 million just 2 years ago." "The company was overvalued 2 years ago," I corrected. "And I offered far more than any other buyer would have. Most would have just stripped it for parts and buried the Donovan name for good." He glared at me. "Is that your plan then? To erase your own family's legacy? Despite everything, I respect what Grandpa built and what you maintained. The Donovan name stays, but the company itself is going to change, radically." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty showed on his face. "What exactly are your plans?" I'd waited a decade for him to ask for my business opinion. The irony was almost funny. "Donovan Industries will become the enterprise logistics division of Apex Innovations. We'll focus on modernizing your old products and integrating them with our AI platforms. We will keep about 60% of the staff, but there will be big changes in upper management." "And me?" he asked, the question hanging in the air. "You'll be offered the title of Chairman Emeritus. No operational control, but you'll keep an office and can advise on legacy client accounts during the transition." His jaw tightened. "A figurehead. A respected advisory role," I countered, "with a full benefits package and a very generous salary." He suddenly stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the perfectly manicured lawns. For a long moment, he just stared out at the estate generations of Donovan money had built, his back to me. "How did you do it?" he finally asked, his voice much quieter. "Create something so valuable from nothing. No family connections, no seed money. I had my education," I reminded him, "the one thing you couldn't take from me. And I had a powerful motivation to prove you wrong." He turned back to face me. "I expected you to fail." "I know. Most people do. I mean, 90% of startups don't make it past the first few years," I thought. He hesitated, as if struggling for the words. "I thought I was protecting you from the inevitable disappointment. By making sure I never had the chance to even try?" I raised an eyebrow. "That isn't protection, Dad. That's control." He flinched at the word. "Maybe. I built this company on the foundation my father left me, and I grew it tenfold. I thought I knew best." "But you didn't," I said plainly. "You were wrong about me. Wrong about where the industry was headed. And you were wrong about Leo being the right person to take over." At the mention of my brother, his expression hardened. "Leo may have his faults, but his loyalty to this company is absolute. Leo has been embezzling from the company for at least 3 years," I told him, point blank. "I have the records to prove it. That's one reason I moved now, before he could do any more damage." Dad collapsed back into his chair, the news seemingly too much to process while standing. "That's impossible!" $300,000 funneled out through fake supplier accounts. The proof is irrefutable. But why would he steal? He has a huge salary, a trust fund. "Gambling debts," I said. "Mostly sports betting, from what our audit found." Dad put his face in his hands for a second, then looked up at me, suddenly looking all of his 68 years. "So my son was a thief and my company was failing, and I was too blind to see any of it." The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I was ready for more rage, more denials, not this broken confession. "Not blind," I said, my tone softening just a little. "Just looking in the wrong direction." A long silence stretched between us, thick with years of unspoken words and missed opportunities. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced with what sounded like real curiosity. "How did you do it?" he asked. "For real. No contacts, no investors who knew the family name. How did you build something so big?" I thought about giving a vague answer, but his question felt genuine for the first time in our lives. "I started small," I explained, telling him how I did freelance coding just to build up some capital. Then I designed a proprietary logistics platform that solved a problem every major company had, connecting their old systems to modern cloud networks. It was based on that proposal you rejected when I was 22. A flash of memory crossed his face, the one about the middleware solution. I nodded, surprised he remembered that detail. "Yes, I perfected it, made it more adaptable, and used it to land our first big contracts. I reinvested every dollar. lived on instant noodles in a tiny apartment for 3 years, and found a team of brilliant people who believed in the vision. Without the Donovan name to open doors for you, he said, more to himself than to me. And so, in a way, I had to set him straight. See, being underestimated is a huge advantage if you play it right. No one saw me coming. He almost cracked a smile at that. Clearly not. Another silence fell between us, but this one felt different, less like a fight. I checked my watch. The press release goes live in 45 minutes. We need to discuss what's next. What about Garrett and Maya? He asked. Garrett gets a choice: resign quietly with a generous severance or face the legal music for his embezzlement. As for Maya, I paused. She actually made a brilliant case last night for becoming our brand ambassador. Her skills on social media are incredibly valuable in the right role. Dad looked genuinely shocked. You'd keep them on after all this? This was never about destroying the family, Dad. It was about claiming my place on my own terms. He gave a slow nod, his gaze dropping to the papers on his desk, then meeting mine with a strange intensity. You completely played me, he said, and I was stunned to hear something that sounded a lot like pride in his voice. Your grandfather would have been impressed. Coming from him, that was the closest I'd ever gotten to his approval. A wave of something complex washed over me. Not victory, not quite forgiveness, but something in between. I learned by watching you, I admitted, even when you thought I wasn't paying attention. He held his hand out across the wide desk. So, Chairman Emeritus. I took it, sealing the first professional deal we'd ever made as equals. Welcome to Everest Holdings, Dad. 6 months after that game-changing Thanksgiving, I was standing in the new headquarters of Pierce Everest Technologies. The old software building was unrecognizable open workspaces, bleeding-edge tech, and a vibe that honored the past while sprinting toward the future. My job as CEO of the holding company meant splitting my time between San Francisco and Boston, overseeing the merger and our growing product line. The transition had its bumps, but honestly, it was more successful than I ever dreamed. Dad shocked everybody by embracing his chairman emeritus role with real grace. After the anger wore off, he found he loved mentoring the younger staff and connecting with old clients. We started a weekly meeting for him to share his insights on company history and industry contacts. I actually started to look forward to them. For the very first time, we were building a relationship based on respect, not disappointment. Garrett's situation was a bit more complicated. When I confronted him with the proof of his theft, he threatened to sue me and the company. But eventually, he realized he didn't have many options. He took a deal, pay the money he stole, resign from his executive role, and enroll in an MBA program if he ever wanted back in. To my surprise, he chose school over exile. Now he's halfway through his first semester and sometimes calls with sharp questions about business strategy. Maya absolutely blossomed as the new brand ambassador for our consumer products. It's a small but growing division that really needed her social media genius. Her followers loved the whole family business drama, which she expertly spun as a tale of female empowerment and reconciliation, not the messy truth. Her rebrand of our tech actually got us into younger markets we'd failed to crack for years. But Mom, she probably changed the most. Free from her job as the family peacekeeper, she drank less, started volunteering to help educate women, and even joined the board of a tech incubator for female founders. I want to help other girls like you, she told me, so their mothers don't make my mistakes. Walking through the office now, people nod at me with respect or smile. I'm not Emmy Stone, the mystery founder, or Logan Pierce, the forgotten kid. I'm just Morgan, the CEO who turned around a failing family business and made new opportunities for everyone. My assistant broke my train of thought. Your father's in the conference room with the quarterly reports, she said. And your mother called to confirm dinner tonight with the new investors. I thanked her and headed to the meeting, but stopped for a moment at the new company timeline in the main lobby. It showed the whole journey, from my grandfather's garage startup to Pierce Everest Technologies. My picture was now on that wall with my grandfather and my father. 3 generations of leaders, my achievements finally given the same weight as theirs. Thanksgiving was coming up, and this year, it would be completely different. We planned a smaller, more intimate family dinner, without all the fake traditions that defined our old get-togethers. No forced speeches of gratitude, no business talk, just family. We were all still learning how to actually see and listen to each other. The road from being cast out to becoming the leader was so much harder than I ever imagined when I left Boston 10 years ago. Juggling family and business every day takes a level of patience I'm still trying to find. Sometimes the weight of old hurts would threaten to undo all our progress, especially when old habits crept back into tense meetings or family dinners. The hardest part wasn't buying the company. It was the daily work of building relationships that could survive our shared past and our new professional roles. Dad still sometimes slipped into his old commanding tone before catching himself, and I'd find myself getting defensive, expecting a dismissal that never came. But slowly, one conversation at a time, the Pierce family was finding a new rhythm. Mom hosted a dinner last month where, for the first time I can remember, everybody talked, everybody listened, and nobody stormed out. Small wins, but they felt huge. The biggest moment, though, happened late one night at the office when Dad and I were reviewing the first quarter results after the merger. The numbers were incredible. Client retention was at 98%, and new contracts had boosted revenue by 32%. You know, he said, staring at the spreadsheet, you've already done more than I did in my first 10 years running this place. That one simple sentence healed a part of me I didn't even know was still broken. Not because I needed his professional approval anymore, but because it was the human approval I'd wanted all my life. This whole thing taught me that success alone can't fix a broken family. The thrill of proving everyone wrong felt good, but it was empty until it led to a real connection. I had to learn the difference between winning and healing, between being right and being whole. As I walked into the conference room where Dad was waiting with the reports, I thought about what a long road it had been from that disastrous Thanksgiving to this moment. The lesson I learned wasn't that success is the best revenge. It's that success without reconciliation just leaves everyone feeling empty. The real victory wasn't when I proved my father wrong. It was when we both found a way to be right together. For anyone watching who knows the unique pain of a family business, who's felt invisible to the people who should see you the clearest, I hope my story gives you both hope and a bit of a warning. Building your own success is powerful, but healing family wounds takes more than just a great quarter. It takes honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to give second chances, even when you feel they aren't deserved. Have you ever faced something like this in your family business? Drop a comment below and share your story. How did you handle the messy overlap of family and work? Like, subscribe, and share this if it hit home for you. Thank you for following my journey from rejection to reconciliation. And remember, the real measure of success isn't what you build alone, but what you can finally build together.